good on my end.
All right, Kerry, welcome back. This is part two of the sales framework for non-sales professionals. It's great for executives, coaches, anyone who finds themselves selling in a non-traditional sales environment. And the difference is it's more of a conversation rather than a sales presentation, and it can be very fragmented. So this is part two. We'll be talking about the presentation and the close, which is where we left off.
Perfect.
And that's the slide we have right there is the open-ended questions. We always start with open-ended questions, but the point I want to drive home is it's not just open-ended questions. It's open-ended questions to keep moving towards understanding what their needs are. It's driving down the funnel. So the question about how do you like to spend your time on the weekends is an open-ended question, but it may not give you any information in terms of fact finding. A better open-ended question, if a person is selling cars, is what kind of drives do you take on the weekend when you just want to get away? That would be an open-ended question if you're selling cars, and it's information that's helping you understand better about what kind of car they might want. Yes, open-ended questions, but think about them so that they're giving you information towards the fact finding. And then we have either or questions, and that's to get out of rapport land and moving forward, you start asking, oh, that's interesting. Do you like to do overnights or is it usually an out and back trip? Either or, right?
Hmm.
And because that can tell you how much they have to pack. If they're overnight, they need trunk space. If it's out and back, you could maybe get away with the two-seater. It's just you're getting information, you're building a model in your head as we go through this. And then the evaluation is fact finding. You're just wanting to get a little bit more information from that. So is there any reason why you limit your trips to this? Is there, and what is it that keeps you from going further? Just to understand, well, you don't want to judge, you want them to tell you.
Well, I think the open-ended questions, if another way to look at it, is really finding out where their head is at. And then the drilling down further is really finding out why it's important to them. High level, big picture, where they're at and how they're living life, how they're driving cars, for example, what's when they get in the car, what's it like? But more importantly than understanding why it's important.
And I like that. It reminds me, I like to think in terms of one question gives you the data point, but you don't know if that data point arrived at from expanding or from contracting. So you
Yeah.
have to ask a second question to find out how they arrived at that data point. That's what gives you, it's sort of like on your way to triangulating to find out a location, but one point is not enough to know where they are. It's how did they arrive there? Asking a question like that. And then we have this one, and this is actually a summary slide. So there's a lot on there. And we talked about the pre-call. So you want to fill the tank, drills and rituals. I think drills are important, speaking drills, but also rituals. For example, I know salespeople who will spend 10 minutes just doing affirmations and it may look like psyching themselves up, but they're priming themselves. They're readying themselves. And for the sales managers out there, if you've got a big day or an important sales day and you're a sales manager, try not to bring up negative stuff to your salespeople. They've worked to get themselves in the zone. I've seen sales managers go to salespeople and bring up something that's on their mind that could wait. And now they put the salesperson into a kind of a defensive, negative kind of mentality because they brought up something negative. They've undone some of that priming. And when you're dealing with high performing salespeople, they're not doing this for the money. They're doing it because it's intrinsic motivation. And when you take them off that game, you could lose them for that day. They're just like, okay, it doesn't matter. I'll just have a good day. I'll get a cup of coffee and chill out, right? And the
Yeah.
numbers are still going to be good, but they're not going to be what they could have been. And you were a
Yeah.
sales manager.
Yeah.
You don't have to
Yeah.
tell on yourself, but did you ever do that?
Yes, I did. And over time, I stopped doing that and started using techniques of helping my sales professionals get are you on the court or off the court? So if you're not on
Oh,
the court, tell me what's going on and let me help you get on the court because being off the court, I'm kind of in the doing drills like in sports or athletes. They can't get if they're not ready to get on the court, they're going to get on and take a shot. Their chance of making it is going to be slim if they're not really ready to put their shoes on the court and play the game. And that's for a sales professional as well. It's about putting yourself in the right position, the right frame of mind, and getting on the court so you can really be present.
And that's exactly right. And I think it's important for both the salesperson and the sales manager to be aware of
Yes, yes.
just what's going on. So very good. I like that. I like that idea. Yeah. So the other one would be rituals. I think breathing is a good one to come back to anchoring. Implementation intentions. If the prospect does this, I'm going to do that. What you're doing is a mental rehearsal before the thing happens. If
Hmm.
they say they want to think about it, I'm going to say this. And you don't wait for the I want to think about it to come. You know,
Hmm.
there's only a few answers that come from the close. Either yes, or I'll think about it, or no, or it's not the right time. Have an implementation intention already prepared, so you're
Yeah.
not like going into shock. I mean, you knew that the person might say no, so that's part of the sales process. Mental contrasting is just this would be prep work. It's looking at what you want versus where you are, and it's keeping that gap in your mind so that you're moving towards it. It's not a negative thing. It's just the contrast of where I am and what I need to be doing, and that could be a picture of I need to close better. I need to follow up with the objections. I need to do one more follow up or one more objection handling instead of stopping short. Right? That could be one of the things that you're saying. What I've been doing is that, but what I need to be doing is this. Mindset, we don't have it figured out yet. Adding the word yet is always a good way to move back into a growth mindset. And the I don't want power is a big one. This, I think, can contribute somewhat to call reluctance. I don't want power is interesting because it kicks in with willpower. So when they did studies on the brain, they can see that when a person starts exercising their willpower, there's another part of the brain that lights up, and it turns out it's I don't want power. A way to think about it is the prefrontal cortex, most people know, was formed from age 19 to 27. And with the prefrontal cortex is 20 billion neurons, fully 20% of our neurons. What it's doing is operationalizing the conditioning that happened from 0 to 7. So let's just say that a person, when they were 5 years old, they experienced their parent having a bad situation with the salesperson. And their parent is ranting about it, and they're angry and they're annoyed. And at 5 years old, they lock in that selling is bad. I don't want to be a salesperson. And they don't think about it again. And then the prefrontal cortex forms, and it takes the conditioning from the 5 to 7, as well as the teens, and it sort of sets it up as your personality. This is your model of the world. Well, now the person's 40 years old and they decide they want to learn how to sell, or they need to start selling, or maybe that's their role. And they keep getting this resistance. They don't know where the resistance is coming from. Well, what happens is when we're older, once the prefrontal cortex is formed and we start exercising willpower, the very act of exercising willpower, it's an association, it triggers the I don't want power. Now, it's not because it's trying to get in our way, it's a survival mechanism, it's to keep us safe. The I don't wants from 5 years old are the things that we learned were not positive or not good. So it makes sense. Go back to hunter gatherer. The fear of public speaking, they tell me, may have come from the fact that if you spoke up in front of the chief, you could get killed. And so that makes sense that there's a fear of public speaking because you're told not to speak your mind. But that's an example of how the I don't want power is kind of misplaced, because we need to reconcile that. So as a coach, you can listen to people. As a sales manager, you can listen to people and sort of suss that out a little bit and then dig in behind it. But you don't want to ignore that, because they will be fighting against themselves. They have I don't want power set up as a threat, and yet they're trying to sell, but it's a fight. And when you move that I don't want power, then you can see they're free to go. There's a release of the energy.
Well, and so now putting on my coaching hat is what I do now. Is the career ownership coaching. What I do pre-meeting, and it's really important that my clients know this, is that I don't want an outcome. I want them to uncover their outcome. I want them to discover their outcome. and so that they feel that it's a safe environment for them to open up and share their dreams, their goals, their hopes. Because if they haven't been allowed to dream a little bit when they were younger, or dream a little bit in their last position and employee or contribute, coming and speaking with me or beginning to speak with me, I have to reassure them, and I have to tell myself in my mindset getting ready to talk to someone that it is not my outcome, it is their outcome, it is their journey. So if I'm projecting that for myself, in within myself, I'm hoping that my clients will also feel that it is, this is not a push, this is not a resistance relationship, this is an outcome that they're going to be working on, and it's going to move them forward, and it's not my outcome. I don't want the power, I don't want the outcome to be a reflection on me, I want the outcome to be a reflection on them.
Yeah.
Is that?
And I think that as a with your coaching hat, you probably will see that I don't want power come in. Somebody's saying they want to have a business for themselves, but they get cold feet. They keep struggling, and by asking questions, you can see where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Especially if you start paying attention to how quickly that emotion is coming up. If it's a habitual thought pattern that makes them afraid of the business, it's worth it to dig into that a little bit and see where it came from and how long they felt that way and how important is it and how can they take baby steps to move forward and unpack it a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. But recognizing that it could be triggered from inside just because they had a bad experience or maybe a family member had a bad experience with the business and they got locked into something that's scary for them.
Yeah. I think it's great recognition in this section here. What you're talking about is really putting some time and thought into the whole pre call or the pre interaction, the before you step into a sales or
Yeah.
coaching or any other role outside of just having a social conversation. When you're doing sales, this is a business, it's about growing your business, it's about changing lives. And so putting some thought into it before you step into that room, into that networking group, into that, meeting that you've set up, it's real important, I think.
Yeah. And then this next column, fact finding, these are more like things to keep in mind as you're going through it. As the salesperson, you're the tour guide, you're managing the environment. If you ever watch tour guides, you can see they have multiple things going on in their head at the same time. They're telling you about this thing, and they're also
Mhm.
thinking about the person over there who is sitting on the edge and they may fall. And do they, you know, what it is, they've got all this going on. That's the
Yeah.
salesperson. And they
Yeah.
want to, and so these are some just key thoughts. Having patience. You want to let things unfold. The more a salesperson can recognize that their role is not to sell the person on the solution, but to help the person give themselves permission to take the solution, to give themselves permission, it's helping them get out of their own way. People, and that's why when we get into the lead generation, if the person said, yes, I'm interested in this, it's not so much making them more interested, it's helping them answer the questions that they have internally that are keeping them blocked. It's almost like their I don't want power. What's their I don't want power that's coming up when they think about doing this? What is that habitual pattern that's coming up that's keeping them from doing this thing that they've been wanting to do? Person wants to take a vacation, a cruise, and it's X number of thousands of dollars, and they may say it's expensive, but then you look at their life and they spend two or three times that on stuff that's less, right?
Yeah.
So it's not really the money, and you figure out what it is. But anyway, having
It's
patience
something
to let it
else.
unfold. We're there to be of service. Always curiosity. We want to keep leaning into curiosity. And then scarcity, I put that on there because you don't want to be desperate. You don't want to
Mm.
be like you need the sale. You want your conversation to be such that there is some exclusivity. That it's not
Yeah.
everybody's not going to get this. Without introducing additional scarcity. It's just the point is you're not going to be like we have so many of these. We need buyers. And pre-framing, we talked last time about priming, and pre-framing is a form of priming because if you know that the price is high, rather than deal with that after it comes up, you can state. Now, a lot of people will look at this and think about the price, but keep in mind, this is actually solving three things at one time. It's doing the work of three different items that you don't have to buy. So you're not just paying the price for one thing. You're getting three things for that price, much below what three of them would cost or what the solution is. Enterprise software, when they're selling enterprise software, you're getting a CRM, you're getting the email piece, you're getting the sales tools, the sales framework, or whatever. You're buying the enterprise software. The reason it's so much money is because you don't have to own all these other apps underneath it, as an example. And that would be the example. The example was pre-framing, just letting them know how to look at this before they hear the price. And then the last one, visualization. I talked last time about seeing the person write the check helps me
Yeah.
calm down,
Yeah.
right? And then visualizing yourself in the position of authority. You don't have to hope they buy. You are sitting there ready to respond to whatever comes up. You're the person who has the authority. You know more about your product and service than they do. Back to mindset, keeping it growth and moving forward, positive and not fixed mindset that things are possible, keeping it that things are possible. The power of choice. I put that in there because when we're selling, yes, there's price and the offer, but there's also terms. Maybe they don't want it with this or that, but they'll take it with something else. Maybe you could add additional services in there if they're having trouble with the price. There's different things you can do where you
Hmm.
can add on and enrich whatever they're getting. This is done in the presentation. I always say slow down. Remember, you know your product and service. They have to. They're literally like trying it on as you're presenting. They're feeling their way through it, and you have to give them time to do that. So I say pause and respond, not react.
The demonstration to me is really, really important, but it doesn't have to be about the product. It is about the product, but it's about how does that product meet their needs or solve their problems. So using their words, using their examples, using the information they shared with you in the fact finding is what you're demonstrating so that they can visualize themselves how that product is going to solve using their words and their examples and what's important to them in the fact finding. It will resonate with them more when that is what the demonstration is about versus in demonstration. I think we try to, well, in pre-call and fact finding, we try to pre-sell them and then we try to sell them and then we try to sell them again, and the demonstration gets watered down
Yeah,
because we've been trying to do that all along versus taking the information that we've learned and applying it in the demonstration that actually sells the product by using their words and the information they shared with you on how that product or service solves something for them. Not like you said, giving you a sale to put in your cap, feather in your cap when you leave to make your quota. You want to be in front of a person who needs your product and services when they have a need you can solve, not
exactly.
when you need a sale
Right.
to meet a goal
No,
or quota. Because
exactly. And I think that's why I like this idea of selling in a non-traditional environment. And it's
yeah,
different from what salespeople have to deal with because a lot of times they're faced with having to sell a product that may not be a perfect fit. And I'm not taking
yeah,
anything away from anybody. It's just the nature of the beast, right? I mean,
right,
you have
right,
quotas and you got to make numbers and you have a sales manager to report to. And it's a gray area because if the sales manager let salespeople just do whatever they want and not push at all, they're not going to make the numbers. And on the other end, maybe they're pushing too far, and you're going to see it come back in returns and poor reviews. So it is a
yeah.
balance, and I think the sales manager has a bigger role in that sometimes than people think.
Well, I think that the higher level, the C-suite professionals who maybe, again, not maybe, that don't have that title as sales, what they need to have the confidence is in themselves is they have the broader view of how their organization can help another organization,
Yes,
and they have also the credibility,
exactly.
they have
Oh
the
yeah,
authority because they are the
yeah.
decision maker. So you're a decision maker presenting a solution to another decision maker. And so the conversation has to be really, really tight on what is that value proposition? Because a
And that's a good
C-suite selling
reminder
to a
because for that
C-suite
person,
selling to C-suite. Yeah, go
the
ahead.
power
Sorry.
of choice comes in even more so because they can package it differently. They can pull things out. They're not set. stuck with a set price. This one is sort of a review, and I like that you use demonstration because that's what it is. You're demonstrating. Yes, it's a presentation, but you're demonstrating how the value works in their life. It's very personalized. The either/or questions provide the content for your presentation. Remember, because that's why the either/or. You're finding out, is it blue or is it red? Is it dark blue or light blue? You know, you said blue. Is it dark blue or light blue? Whatever. And then the yes questions, we'll talk about those a little bit more, but it's important to get the person saying yes. And it's not about forcing a yes. It's about finding the things that are important to them, reflecting them back, so they naturally say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the tie downs are one way of yes questions. The tie downs are that makes sense, doesn't it? You know, just using it. But as I said last time, it kind of feels salesy for some people. It feels pushy. But I encourage you to work with it and make it natural. I don't feel like I'm being salesy if I say, that sounds okay, doesn't it? I don't feel like I'm being salesy. It's just natural. So what I've done in sales training is having people use a non-sales topic. Like, let's say you're out to dinner with some friends and you're eating and you say, wow, this is really good, isn't it? You're not selling. It's just a conversation. You know, man, this restaurant, I like this restaurant. We should come back here again, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
You're not selling. And just to get used to the rhythm of how you say a tie down,
Yeah.
and then
That's
you
a good
apply it.
exercise. Yeah.
You apply it to the sales product. And just doing it back and forth, back and forth. It doesn't take long. 2 sessions of practicing that, and it'll be a more natural flow, and you won't feel like it's so stilted.
I say that would be called socializing the close. Socialize it.
I
Make it
like
part
that.
of make it part of your conversation.
I
Check in
like
with
it.
the person you're talking to and see if they're on the same page with you.
And then the implicit downstream problems caused by the explicit problems. This is the part about spin I think people miss, is really understanding the implications of the explicit stuff. What is that? What else happens? You know your business, you know what your product serves. If if they're having to deal with machines being down, you know, or machine software that needs to be rebooted or what have you, you know the downstream cost of that. You know that that's causing impacts with customers, it's causing impact with processes, and so you can talk about some of that. Continue expanding the know, like, and trust. I talked last time about getting into the a little deeper into the personal persona and then entering into the private persona. And the know, like, and trust is to keep earning your right to be in that private persona. You can't just do the know, like, and trust. Oh, that's a nice boat, and think you have enough rapport for the whole presentation. You have to keep building that know, like, and trust. And then we have this here. So we've got the roadmap, and I said that we're, if they're not a good prospect early on, we get to reschedule or decide to continue. We we don't have to make a pitch just because we thought they might be a prospect. If we decide it's not a good fit, we can terminate that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not losing a sale. You're just putting it off until there's better timing. Now, don't let this become a way to give into call reluctance, right? You still
Right.
have to
Right.
do the hard work. Selling is high paid hard work. And this is showing that for new salespeople, I put this in there for new salespeople, somebody new at selling, you need a 10 to get a sale. Your skills and timing make up 1 to 10, and the prospect's need payoff makes up 1 to 10. If you're a 3 as a salesperson and your timing, you're down at the 3, you need a 7 over here. And
Mm-hmm.
as you get your skills and timing up to 6, 7, 8, qualifying, fact finding, then you could find yourself making some sales that you probably would have lost before. So we want to keep working on our skills, but also make sure that we're doing things on purpose to get to the right people.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Here's some of the sample questions for those folks who don't like the tie downs. Are you with me? Does that make sense? Did I hear you right on that? Are we on the same page? And these would follow you making a statement that they've already said. Remember, we had open ended questions, we had either or questions. We should know the answers to these questions. We should know what we can say that they'll say yes to. And then when they don't say yes, it's good information because they're clarifying something.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I would say get comfortable. That'll make it easier, won't it? Just get comfortable with the little tie down at the end.
Yeah, and it's just a way to check in. Are we on the same page? Did I
Yeah.
hear you right?
And then, so the big close. I remember when I first started selling, the close was this practice thing. Either or, would you like that? Pay all at once. You gonna, or do you want to make a down payment or whatever the language was? And it's always, are you gonna pay a check or do you want us to have it drafted from your account? It's the either or. It's like it's a big deal. But what I in the executive selling to another executive, you don't close like that. And salespeople don't have to close like that. The way I recommend thinking about a close is you've done a good job of fact finding. You summarize the needs and payoffs. So if I'm understanding you, if I've heard you correctly, the situations that are going on in your organization are this, and this, and what you're wanting to do is to make a correction without causing yourself problems in other places, right? And you found that this solution does that. Then you recommend the proposed solution based on what you've said and based on what we have here. I think the way to go is you start off with just the first two modules. This thing is a module operation. We do the first two components. We get them installed. We get people used to it and start moving it along. And then we'll roll in modules 3, 4, and 5 slowly into the organization based on a timetable and adoption rate. And then I say that because one, it allows you to spread the cost out over time. Two, it's a way to get the change management done. And also, the first two modules, people see a big benefit. The benefit is higher for the users in the first two modules. And then as we roll in modules 3, 4, and 5, then the organization gets the benefit as well. And the last reason is it's much less disruptive. So with that in mind, my recommendation is to let's get started with the first two modules. You made the position, and then it's like, what's the next step? Or from here, the next thing we do is just need to get a check and a signature. Do you have the authority to do that, or whatever it is you're going to ask? The point being, they will respond to your position. I mean, to your recommendation. They'll either say, I need to think about it, or we need more time. But you've made that is your close. You've made the recommendation. This is what I recommend, and let them be the one to give you more information.
And the way you just did that was really important because you're giving them, like you said, why. You're telling them because. You're giving them the why behind you think this is the right solution. And I love the idea that this is where you also present, like you said, the next step with an assumptive close to move ahead with those first two modules. But sometimes we want to say more and we're kind of cliffhanging there to see, okay, what should we do? What else should we say? And I recommend you say nothing until, like you said, they'll come back and they'll either say, yeah, that sounds great. How do we make this happen? How do we make the financial transaction happen to get this going? Or I'm not quite sure. I don't know if I really understand X, Y, or Z, but you have to stop long enough to give them a chance to respond. I think that's something
Yes.
we should put in this slide and really reinforce when we're working with professionals, no matter what level you're at, and trying to sell a product or service, and that is give the person time to respond.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. And I put assumptive close there because the reason why there's so much talk about the assumptive close is because people don't like making a decision. And so you're saving them from having to make a decision because you can see people, their face gets red and they get tense. And what you're doing is treating it as the decision's already been made. You told me in the last conversation that you really need to do this. That's what you want to do. All we have to do now is get the paperwork done. But we're not making it a big thing. It's like you've said yes a long time ago, right? They've been
Yeah.
saying yes. Now it's just getting the paperwork done. That's the idea behind the assumptive close. It's not that you've been resisting and you haven't gotten any yeses and you've been dancing around it, and then all of a sudden you're going to say, "Are you ready to buy this big thing that you don't know what it is, right?" And it's just it doesn't work that way. You've been chipping away at it all along.
I think that's a great call out. Is you, you should assume the close, like you said, if you've been doing all of the work along the way and really uncovering what is most important to them and why, and those all those fact finding questions, you're solving the problem based on what they told you. So why
Yeah,
would they not want to?
exactly. And remember, that's why we stopped earlier on. We had
Yeah,
those pauses and we had that gating. We wouldn't have gone into the presentation
right,
if they
right,
didn't give us the buying signals. So it's not a
right,
big deal at that point. You've already made that choice earlier.
right.
And at this point, it's just getting out of the way and
It
helping
doesn't mean
them,
they're not going to have questions. The questions should be, though, how do we move forward?
exactly,
So don't think there
exactly,
won't be a question and get rattled if they come back with one or two more questions. But the questions should be geared toward how do we take the next step? What is the next step? How do you want to receive, you know, payment if there's a,
exactly.
payment involved to start the process. But
And I think as the
well,
salesperson, they could think of it as those questions are really implementation questions. The questions that come up are
our help, yeah,
implementation and getting started questions. They're not questions about. So if a person says, "Well, does this thing have a regular maintenance schedule?" Instead of taking that as a defensive or, kind of feeling like maybe they don't want it, you say, "Oh yeah, we'll work through that. We'll discuss that. You'll get a whole onboarding package, and we'll set up
hmm,
a calendar for you, and everything will it's set up on a schedule that it'll be easy to follow. Whatever. You're just turning it into an implementation question, not a should I buy question.
makes sense. Love it.
These are slides as a review. We're not going to cover in depth, but we covered a lot of information. So it's just a way to maybe take a screenshot and then have it there as a reminder. So the rapport and affirm open-ended questions, to build a rapport process, evaluation questions to understand the readiness. When considering a new card, do you see this as something you're ready to move forward with now, or are you just starting to explore your options? You're just this is early on. This is where you're making your choices. You're asking questions that are guiding you. You're not just asking questions for rapport. That's the big point I made earlier. And then let me just show that slide real quick because this is the one we're talking. This one. This is the pre-qualify and the fact finding, and we decide we have a pause here, we have a pause here because this is a deeper emotional level, and if they're not ready to move forward and you can't see yourself having a decision, you don't want to go to this level because this is where the emotion starts to build. And then once you have the emotion built, if you go and give the presentation, you're not going to be able to get to that level of emotion again. So if they're not ready, you put it off and you come back later. You recap on the fact finding, you get that emotion going, and then you can make the sale here. But you don't want to get a decision without them being ready, because that decision will be a no. A confused mind is going to say no. So you have to make sure that they're ready. And fact finding, just like open-ended questions, either or questions. This is important to have in your mind a plan going from open-ended to either or to evaluation questions to yes questions. When I say evaluation, you're looking at prioritization, you're looking at urgency, you're looking at what has the heavier weight, and that's going to come into play when you make your demonstration. And this is fact finding part two. Deepen the conversation by exploring the consequences of their challenges. Again, open ended questions. You can go back and ask more open ended questions. And you can ask more either or questions, but now you're down into the private persona. Right? You were in
Mhm.
the public persona, now you're in the private persona, and you can ask more either or questions, but you're Every one of us, they're all intentional, and you're moving towards that being able to get yes questions because you've done that homework. Or yes answers, I should say. And then the transition. Summarize the need, payoff, the temperature check. This is getting into the demonstration. From what you've shared, you're looking for, I did it based on cars, you're looking for a luxury vehicle that delivers performance or comfort or technology, and you want to ensure it's worth a worthwhile upgrade from what you're driving now. Does that sound accurate? It's just this, you're summarizing it. The need payoff question. If we could offer a vehicle that enhances your driving experience with better performance, advanced technology, blah, 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 that truly stands out, would that be something worth considering? You've This is not just some words. This is based on what they've told you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not canned. When I talk to salespeople about this, they want scripts. I can't give you scripts for this because I don't know what they've told you. The scripting is earlier. The scripting is how the questions are that you're asking in the beginning. But once you get here, you're giving them their words back. Does that sound like the kind of upgrade you've been looking for? It it's going to be if you've been listening to them and applying it, and then the gain in mind or commitment. If so, let's see what that says. If so, would you be open to exploring the specific models that best match what you want? So now you're into the demonstration, and then in car terms, this is where you would do the test drive. You'd go out
Mm-hmm.
and have them drive the car that fits. And
Yeah.
this is the presentation, the demonstration. Present the solution, tie it directly to the prospect's needs, and recommended next steps. Based on what you're looking for, I'd recommend the luxury Model X. It offers the refined comfort, cutting edge technology, etc. And then connecting the deeds. Unlike other vehicles in this class, it also comes with, and these exclusive features, adaptive suspension, etc. It's something that's tied into what's important to them. A car, the reason I use the car as a good example is there's dozens and dozens and dozens of features. You don't
Yeah.
need to sell all the features and benefits. You just need to pull out the two or three that tied into what they were saying, but you have to have enough product knowledge so that you're asking the right questions early
Right.
on and you're not just selling the canned stuff that's in their brochure
Right.
that's, like just vanilla. You want to have
Right.
it tied to them.
Which is why having a script isn't possible, because if you're going to actually be successful in selling, you have to understand what unique features are really going to benefit that individual. And I may want something completely different to you. You may think just because I said I wanted, um, I don't know, heated seats, that I want cooled seats as well.
Yeah,
No, I don't.
exactly.
I actually don't like those. But if you don't ask me, you don't.
Good
If you don't like,
example.
you just won't. You're going to. And here's the thing too. I always talk about this. If you're going to probably present what you like most or what you're most comfortable talking about, which is not going to help you close a sale or build a
Exactly.
relationship, because it's not built on what you want that person to, what you like, or what's easiest for you to present or sell on. You'll lose the customer every single time. It's really going into a script is taking that person totally on a wild goose chase, and they're not going to come with you, because people, they value their time.
And I
And
think
it helps
that
save time too. When you spend this, it helps save time for everybody.
yeah. And I think that's what makes it a challenge when you have non-salespeople selling, coaches, etc. Because the most of sales training uses a script. They're teaching the sales because they're teaching to the masses, and the masses are using a script that works a
Yeah.
good percentage of the time, but it's not going to work on the high ticket sales, and it's not going to work when you're an owner talking to another owner. They're not going to.
Correct.
It's not a presentation. It's a conversation that ties into their needs, and then the solution becomes a natural
Yeah.
fit for them.
Yeah. And as a coach, I have tools and resources and thought exercises, but I don't have any idea how those how the thought exercises are going to go, or where I think they should go a certain way. And if I do, then I'm going to be taking some precious time of individuals who want to explore what's possible, and trying to take them down a road that they don't even know how it even could potentially be of
Right.
importance to them or have an impact, because we didn't spend time on the front end really identifying what was most important to them. And you cannot script what somebody's individual goals are, what somebody's individual values are, and values and goals play a huge role in how people will perceive you as somebody they know, like, and trust, and whether or not they're going to connect with you on that same level. There's somebody
Yeah.
that they can trust, and that you also are going to provide value for them. And if you don't spend that time up front, like I said, you're just going to, it's just a waste of time. And I love this recap here, and I think these slides are great, for going back and reviewing and practicing and really testing where you need to really fine tune some of your skills to be able to get from that 3 to that 10
Yeah,
in terms
yeah,
of selling
exactly.
skills.
It's a good point. I'm glad you brought that back in. And then the objection handling. I know a lot of salespeople who'll say, or books and training will say that the sale doesn't start until the person says no, and you hear other things will say that the the sales are made after you get 5 no's. I think those are all valid, and it's because it's the conversation.
Yeah.
This approach that I'm talking about doesn't negate that. It's just that you're doing it up front. You're doing more of it up front, so you're not getting 5 no's. And I think the 5 no's is back to what you were saying. Is when you have a scripted presentation, all you're doing is talking at the person until the close, and then the real conversation starts. You get 5 no's. What we're doing is working through: is it this one or is it that? Is it that or is it this? And you're narrowing it down, so you're not going to have a whole lot of objections at the end. But I think the way you said it was spot on. And then the objection handling. So there's a basic structure for an objection. You first clarify it, rephrase it, isolate it, and then close again. So the rephrase and acknowledge you've heard them, because a lot of times this is just a reflex. A person has a reflex; they want to think about it, and so I can understand that. It sounds like you're like most of us. You want to know you're making a good decision. So we shift everything from whatever it was to making a good decision, because you have the answer for making a good decision.
Hmm.
You don't
Hmm.
have an answer for wanting to meet with Aunt Sally and wanting to, burn some incense. You don't have answers for that stuff, but you have answers for making a good decision. And so it's, yeah, like you're like most of us. You want to make sure you look at all the options and you're going to make a good decision. Now, and then isolate. Of course, there's no crystal ball, but this meets your top priorities. It's the right blend of blah blah. Plus, it gives you this and that you've been wanting. It sounds like you have your good decision right there. So all we've done is given back to them what they've said.
Hmm.
The clarify that makes sense. You want to make sure you've looked at all the options. Sounds like you're like me and the rest of us. You want to make a good decision. You wanted to have X, Y, and Z, and this has X, Y, and Z in the same order that you wanted. It sounds like you got your good decision right there. You just you're just giving the person permission to, yes, do this,
Hmm.
right? And then the close. The last thing I have to do is get some personal information that I'm missing. Is this going to be in your name or your company name? And just move on. This part here is where you're getting them out of their own way. All you're doing is overcoming the habitual reaction, and you have a plan to overcome that habitual reaction to slow for them to say they want to think about it. This is on price. Price is a little more than I wanted to spend. Map to a good decision. I hear you. Is it more about the total cost or making sure you're getting the best value? Whatever they say. It sounds like you're looking for reassurance that you'll be happy with your decision. Again, I'm mapping it
Hmm.
back to a good decision. And again, this is executive selling to executive. And if it's not a good fit, you wouldn't be in this conversation. You
Yeah.
wouldn't be at this point in the conversation. And then aside from price, is there anything else that concerns you about moving forward? So we've isolated it. One thing to consider is the long-term value. XYZ is going to be a better investment in the long term, and it's going to position you to blah, 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 whatever it is that you're going to say. You're getting the best mix of performance from your investment. Would it help if we looked at financing options? explored. So with this one, I tied in the financing because it was about money. So we're making an offer. This is something, if you're a coach selling a high ticket item, this is where you would then introduce, maybe you could do payments. You don't start with the payments. You want to start with full price, but if you're going to lose the sale, this would be a time where you could offer payments. So that was it. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time, we'll take just a few minutes on the lead generation part of it. And because so much is done online now, and if you understand your lead generation in the context of how you're going to sell, you want those two to work together. And your leads, whatever, whoever's doing leads for you, whatever you're doing some form of attention, interest, desire, action. And here's another example, the pastor framework: problem, amplify the pain; solution, transformation and benefits; the offer, and then the call to action. This is basically what is on your landing page. This is how a landing page is going to be shaped. And then the call to action at the end might be to book a call with you. The way ads work is people will see the ad, it gets their attention, and because the subconscious process is so fast, there's way more information that we're picking up than actually gets through. And that's where the reticular activating system comes in. When something is important to you, the subconscious picks it up and it passes it along and says, hey, this is important. That's why people think, oh, and it showed up. They think that it somehow miraculously showed up at the time that they were thinking about it, when the reality is the ads are there all the time, and
Yeah.
it just gets passed through on the reticular activating system. The reason I put this slide in there is because understanding that they saw an ad and that made them click, and that click made them follow through, that gives you as the salesperson confidence that they were thinking about this. Don't want to be walking in on your heels. You can lean into this thing. You have to make the assumption that they had some interest in this, or they would have never clicked. The headline would have never gotten their attention, and that's important. I've found that that's very helpful for salespeople who feel like they're, just one word away from getting a no, and it flips it on its head to say that the person is interested, or they wouldn't have clicked. They would not have responded to the ad. They would not have accepted the appointment. They would have not have booked it if they were not interested.
Agree.
Yeah,
Agree. Especially booking appointments. You're putting it on your calendar. So did they.
exactly.
Yeah, like you said, people prey on things, and I don't discount that either. But it's something often that we don't even realize that subconsciously there was something else
Yeah.
that triggered that for us. Yeah.
And that this is what we were saying. They booked the meeting
But
for a
yeah,
reason,
yeah.
and you can start with now. After you get the report, I'm just curious. What exactly were you hoping to find out, or what exactly were you hoping to walk away with? In a perfect world, if you had a magic
Mhm.
wand, when you booked this meeting, what's the solution that you were hoping would show up? What would it do for you? That's a fact finding question. You're
Yeah,
getting them
yeah.
to tell you in their words why they clicked and what they're hoping to get. And I talked before about helping people make the shift. Everybody's moving along in a comfort zone, and this breaking out of the comfort zone there's a lot of resistance and cognitive dissonance that happens because we're in a comfort zone for a reason. Because what's outside of the comfort zone is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And as you step into what's uncomfortable, it's very easy for cognitive dissonance to happen. And then you start having self-doubt and you start wondering, is this what should I do? As the salesperson, you have to recognize your job is to hold their hand figuratively and walk them through this. That's why the clarify, rephrase, isolate is structured the way it is. You're basically bypassing, in a way. We talked earlier about bypassing on price. You're essentially bypassing on these, you know, random things that come up at the last minute that they're just trying to get comfortable.
Yeah.
You're giving them that comfort to walk through, which is why you move through that clarify, rephrase, isolate, close process that way.
Yeah.
I bet you
You
run
know,
into this quite a bit when people are thinking
yeah.
about buying a business, or there's a point where it probably gets very hard for them with the cognitive dissonance. They're just like almost have to drag their hand to the pen.
It's unfamiliar, so it feels unsafe. And so it's my role as a coach to help create that safe environment where individuals know that I'm going to be there with them the entire journey. So and hold their hand if that's what it takes, but be
That's what
there
it
to
takes. Yeah.
provide that support. And you talked earlier about being the idea of somebody being giving a tour. Like you're as a sales professional, you're providing a tour. Think about going into you can walk around a big giant museum without a tour guide, and
Right.
it can be overwhelming. Like, what am I looking at? What am I
That's
supposed
true.
to be taking away from this? Is this something that has meaning? If it is, I'm not sure I see it. But that tour guide provides that foundation or that framework for you to understand that meaning, and take something away with you. And in this situation, in a sales, when we're potentially going to be in C-suite sales, it's a large investment. We're not talking typically about smaller tickets. We're talking about larger ticket items. And the same thing when I do, and I'm talking with someone about coaching. It's very unfamiliar. It's going from having a job where you have a job description to being a business owner where you still have lots of tools and resources, but they don't know what exists because
Right.
a lot of the clients I work with haven't had or haven't been a business owner before. They've had a job, and they've had the job description. They've had a boss. They know what that looks like. They know what that feels like. It's familiar. It feels safe, especially if it's in where they got their degree, what they've been doing for the last 10, 15, 20, even 30 years, or maybe where they got their degree, and that feels really safe. It feels really familiar. But stepping outside of that, wow,
Yeah, and I
it's
think it's even harder
huge.
when you come from a corporate environment into a your own business, because in a corporate environment, it's first of all can be so judgmental and critical, and you're
Yes,
judged anything that's less than 99%. They treat you
absolutely.
like a failure. They treat you like you should be fired. Some companies, and you get into this mode where you have to be 95 or above. I remember in the military, if your rating, it was based on 125. If your rating was under 123, it was like your career was over. It's like there's
Yeah, yeah,
everything. Everybody has to be perfect, but the reality, especially today with so much AI, you don't know what headline is going to work. It used to be that you could build something, you build a landing page, and it's fairly predictable about what kind of results you're going to get. Today, there's so much trial and error. You have to be comfortable with putting it out there, seeing what you get, adjust. Put it out there, see what you're going to get, adjust. And that's business today. There's always going to be somebody coming in with a better mousetrap, somebody with a lower price, and
yeah.
you have to decide what battles you're going to take and which battles you're going to just let them fizzle out.
I think that that's something that we both connect on as coaches, Mo, is that reality of there's a lot of that noise out there. There's a lot of the unfamiliar out there. And our role is to help those that we work with realize that they have it within them to do things they've never done before or that they're capable of doing. They just need to get some familiarity with what that is or what it looks like or what it's going to feel like as an end result and realize that their full potential. And I really enjoy working with you on this topic
Yeah.
because I know you've made a huge difference working with me when we first met. And I know you continue to make a difference with professionals you work with and organizations you work with because to make things different and make things better, you have to step out of that comfort zone. You have to think bigger, you have to act bigger, and it can be really, really uncomfortable. But when we work as hard as we do to help our clients overcome that, what's unfamiliar become familiar, it's exciting and it's rewarding, right? To see them
Yeah.
do things they never thought they were capable of doing.
And for your folks who have bought the business, it's having that attitude that it's because things are always changing. There's always new opportunities. Doors are always
Mm-hmm.
opening. When one door closes, there's an opening somewhere else. And it's always waking up looking for that next door that you can go through, because when you go
Yeah,
through that door there's more options. And that to me is one of the big ahas when people step into the trial and error, is as you try things you open up, it opens you up to more things that can be done. And
yeah,
I call it iterative development, as opposed to trial and error. Trial and error, people sometimes feel like it's a waste, but it's iterative. It's iterative development. You know, things
Yeah.
happen in layers.
Well, I think the whole idea of fear is a good one, just in general, about how do people move forward. What does it mean to move forward in the face of fear? I think that's one of the biggest things that holds a lot of people back is the fear of failure, the fear of what other people are going to think about them, the fear of if it costs money, how much money is it going to cost? How much money would I potentially lose if I'm not if it doesn't work for me? It's something that I think we have to think about fear as a positive thing, and there's a cost when people have fear and they don't act. There's a cost sometimes when you do act. But the question really is, like you said, the iterative, what did you get from that? It's really a question too. Are you comfortable if nothing changes because you're afraid? Are you okay with where you're at today with your life and where your future is going to be? The answer to that is no. Then we have to figure out a way to take action. So we need to understand what your purpose is. We need to understand what your choices are. And in the face of fear, help create courage to move forward, to take action. Because
Yeah.
nothing happens without action.
And I think one of the fears that people don't recognize as a fear is the fear of success. Because
Oh, that's a good
as
one.
you get
Yes.
more successful,
Yes.
your failures become larger and more public in your eye. But the reality is, people don't care. People are so focused on
Yeah.
themselves, they don't really care about what happens to you.
That's a good one. Well, I forgot about that. Fear of what if I'm successful?
Maybe we'll be able to do that next one on fear. I have a segment I do, the 5 levels of personal leadership. And it goes from stabilized, you go down to destabilized and down to collapsed, or you can go up from stabilized to agency and expansion. And we're always in one of those 5, especially the middle 3, agency, stabilized, and destabilized. But the more you spend time in destabilized, that's the less amount of time you're spending in agency. So we want to orient ourselves to where we're spending more time in agency and expansion. So you're taking destabilized and collapse off the table. Because as you can imagine, collapsing is not a way to get stuff done.
No, and I think that's what happens in the professional work life. I have this quote here. It says, "People would rather live with the certainty of unhappiness rather than deal with the uncertainty of what they have to do to be happy."
Yeah, that's perfect. Mic drop. All right, thank you, Carrie. It's been great. All right, we'll see you next
Well,
time.
always look forward to it.